Hello everyone. This is going to be a follow-up to my previous video where I kind of went in depth talking about Mitsirugi Ryzeal Primite deck that I was playing. But that was more of a deck list and one card combo guide. This is going to be a way more in depth, ideally. I'm going to talk about how to play around board with different hands, how different cards interact in very specific matchups, as well as more how to play the deck when you get interrupted. So, without that, let's quickly get back into deck list because we're going to talk about some ratios. First of all, the reason we're playing 3 of Akiri. We're playing 3 of this card because it's the best one card in the deck. It's the card that you want to see in your opening hand the most. Its ability to not only lead into Primate plays if you open Ryzeal cards, it doesn't play around like Ash very well or something like a Dominus Purge, but it inherently plays around Nib if you're going for the Rafflesia line, or it can play around things like Purge, because Purge will not actually have that good of a target at any point. Because at any point where you're searching, you're either chain blocking it, or it's the Saji effect in Grave, which if your opponent's getting Saji, that means that they're not playing around with prayers in hand, which most players are going to kind of realize that and not do that. And that also only works if when you've activated your Murakuma, or your Habakiri, sorry, when you've activated your Habakiri, that there is no monster in the graveyard, right? Because you're going to have no cards on field. You're playing the one Murakumo, because while some people play 2 of this card, that's if you play 3 copies of Ritual. We're playing the 1 and 1 because we do not want to see these cards by themselves. We don't want to see Ritual without a Ritual monster. We don't want to see we don't want to see the Ritual without the Ritual spell. The fact that we have to draw either both of them or one of these plus a Habakiri is inherently bad. Although, I will admit, Ritual plus Habakiri is an insanely good opening because it basically blinks this Habakiri from everything. Playing 3 prayers because it's not only is it a starter in the fact that it can search a Habakiri, it can also act as extension if you get interrupted at a specific point by tributing one of the rituals in hand and then summoning a guy from grave. It can also, on top of all of that, be your end board piece because it's the what brings back the Murakumo and the 1 cards. Playing 1 Night Sword, 1 Saji, and 1 Kusanagi because we don't want to draw any of them. Specifically Saji. Saji is the worst card to draw in this deck, I'm pretty sure. Like, I do not think there's a single card I would rather less see in my hand than the Sachi. Playing 1 Harpy's Fellowstone, 1 Harpy's Lady, 1 Drill Beam. The reason we're playing 1 and 1 and 1, all of these cards are searchable on your mainline combo. You never want to see the Harpy Lady in hand. You always want to either summoning her deck or have drawn it at some point and then be sending it from deck. Or you want the Featherstorm to either set a bullet off thrust, or if you hard draw it, it's not the end of the world, but, you know. Lordly Load is the best part of the Primate engine because it doesn't require your normal summon. Sorry, my camera's shaking for no reason. Does that work? Go. Sorry. Since Lordly Load doesn't require your normal summon, it means that not only is it a way to start your lines off because it's a card that's a must answer for your opponent because they just cannot afford to not play around it and then you already have Featherstorm. So it is a must answer. But it also doesn't, once again, by not using your normal summon, it searches things like Drill Beam going second, which if you draw another Primite card, which we'll talk about way later, about why that is important, it just makes it stronger. And then we're playing 2 Ether Barrels, because actually, I would love to play 1 copy of this card. The problem is I actually have to play 2. The reason for that is because it actually avoids bricking. One thing that a lot of people don't know about Primate Lordly Load is when you flip it, you have to search. It is not optional. What that means is we are playing 3 Lordly Loads and 3 Drill Beams. 3 Lordly Loads and 3 targets. In the 2 Ether Barrels and the 1 Drill Beam. That means if we normal summon an Ether Barrel, set your Primate Lordly Load search your Drill Beam. On the follow-up turn, if our Ether Barrel has been sent to graveyard, and we have the Harpy Lady, we can add to hand, summon it, set the second Lordly Load, and search the second Ether Barrel. The other thing happens, what if we cut it down to 1, and we're just saying we're playing for turn 1, drawing either Drill Beam or Leather Barrel bricks the other. What I mean by that is if I've already drawn the Leather Barrel, if I norm summon the Ether Barrel, activate the effect, set the load load, search the Drill Beam. Now any follow-up Ether Barrels have no targets. And if I've already drawn a Lordly Load, then I would want to be able to set the Drill Beam, right? And then use the Lordly Load to search the second Ether Barrel. But I wouldn't be able to because I wouldn't even be able to flip the Lordly Load, so I'd be forced to set a Lordly Load and keep a Lordly Load in hand, which is fine because it does now play around Imperm because you've got Drill Beam in hand, you have Primite in hand. Yeah, it's not bad, but it's not ideal. But if you going second, though, that's where I think that the Primites have the least utility. That's why the Ether Barrel often, outside of these two cards, are the first one to go. I'm actually just straight up not going to talk about these cards specifically. Not the cards, sorry. These cards specifically, I'm just not going to talk about it. Why? These cards are all insane. If I could play 3 of all these cards, I would. This is what you're allowed on the ban list. You are allowed 2 ice, 2 sword, 1 X, 1 bonfire. You cannot have any more. If you could, this deck would be broken. Well, I mean, I think it's tier 0, but you know. Ryzeal Cross, you could play 2 of this. It can't shuffle a copy of itself. It adds more recoverability if you were to play 2. The reason you do not play 2 is because you do not want to be bricking. I'm about to go over why that happens in a second. Playing the node, 1 node, and 1 star. Star, you really want to be summoning off of deck or be searching it and summoning it to get your cross before you go for a duo drive line. Because it protects your duo drive. Node Ryzeal really is just for making Detonator at the end of your combo line, especially because it like plays around Nib. It's really good. Play it. Playing the 1 Gravediggers because we're not playing a second trap card for the Holotea because we just don't need one. If we are using the Reflegia as a monster negate on turn 1 to negate hand trap, great. Otherwise, this is just a great piece of interaction because God knows how powerful Ripper is. Like, I don't think I need to explain to people how strong Ripper is as a card. This is rank 4 Ripper. 3/7 Tachyon. Um, searches everything in the deck. Really good. Triple Tactics Thrust into the Talents. Really good going second. We're not. I would actually like to discuss the non-engine more because I did mention it in the um, deck list, but not as much as I really wanted to talk about. These 9 cards. And when I say non-engine, I'm not going to count the thrusts and the stuff, alright? This is obviously non-engine, but it's different. These are the hand traps. Each one of these cards is here for a specific purpose. Pool Loss is for Molcharmi decks that are like Molcharmiable decks. So that's going to be things like your Malice, that's going to be your, I mean, even decks like this, that's going to be most of your Mitsirugi builds, that's going to be your, not really Draco Tail, but even Draco Tail you draw a card, right? Draw is really good into the bullshit decks of the format. This deck is another one, is what I consider a quote unquote bullshit deck. But what I mean by that, I'm talking about decks like Yummy. Think about a normal Yummy line. Your normal summoning Cupsy effect to search. And now you get Droll. Assuming you don't get Droll, you are searching multiple times on that combo line. Because you are going to search when you make your Cupsy Yummy way. Then you are going to just continue gaining extra advantage along that line, especially if you're talking about modern Yummy decks where they are making things like the Soulful Chords, which the Soulful Chords have not only dual Soulful Chord happiness, but it also has the new level 1, and I believe the old level 2 that searches, as well as the Link 2 if they're playing it. So for all those reasons, Drolls are just so strong right now. And let's not even get started about against Hopkiri. Ash is here to stop your opponent's Fool Loss, and it always does something. Against Dracotail, it either checks something like a Rahu, a Ketu, or Flame, Sting, or Horn. Because every single one of the spell trap is ashable, it gives Ash insane value, even drawn in multiples, even if you draw like 2 Ash, you're not really that fucked about it. Same thing with the fact that prayers, you can negate both a prayers on your turn and a Hobkiri during your opponent's turn. Against Yummy, it stops. It's pretty good against Yummy, I will fully admit that, but that doesn't mean it is bad. And of course, it's basically cross-out designator for your class. playing the den. I'm actually not really going to go over the X. I think that the X trick is very self-explainable. I think the only cards I really need to defend myself on are the Tornado Dragon. Um, I think Tornado Dragon is just so important because it pops floodgates. There's so many random floodgates that this card pops. Your opponent anti-spells you. Take Tornado Dragon, pop it, continue playing. Because Detonator only does something if your opponent activates a card, which, Detonator is the best card in this deck, but that doesn't mean it's do anything. So, let's go into more specifics. First of all, I want to talk about X Ryzeal specifically and application against different decks. X Ryzeal has two main targets, Eclipse Twins and Mirror Logic. You're pretty much always saying Eclipse Twins going first, unless you're in a situation where you're not going to go all in, and then you're setting Aggravator, because Eclipse Twins requires you to go into another rank 4 and Detonator. So, let's talk about Aggravator against every top grade. Against Yummy, you're going to summon the Ascend, and this is pretty much always either going to target the Herald, if they've done a Herald line where it starts on board, or you're going to target the Coolia if you're playing against Soulful Cord Yummy, or the Aggravator can also trade for one of the scariest part of their boards, which is the sorry, I'm like just being really mad with card rate. It's the Diamondo, man. The Diamondo, if they are going for a Diamondo line, then this card is really good into those. But this card is also good into one other line, which is an IP line. Now, unfortunately, these two cards by themselves do not beat IP. Because if you go Summon X, Summon Aggravator, Chainlink 1, Chainlink 2, search your sword, they're going to chain their effect and banish your Ice Ryzeal. And now you do not have a card for sword, so you're either forced to normal the sword, which you don't want to do, because if you're summoning X, probably could not have to use your normal. Or you can search Node Ryzeal, but Node Ryzeal doesn't exactly do anything. So I will say though, against Herald, because now you're getting the search, you search this hand, and this. At this point, your opponent could have Cupseed you, but all those either pop it or shuffle the Aggravator back, which I have seen some people do. I don't know why people do it. If you're willing to use both Young Names, you can pop the X and then shuffle it back into the main deck. But at that point, I think you are very happy to summon your Sword Ryzeal and go off from there. That is a situation where the X chased out way more value than it should have. Now, thing is, we are only playing one copy of X because we can't. But we actually have more than just one copy of X. Because we have the Bonfire, so that's two copies. The 3/7 Tachyon, so that's 5 copies. And going second, we're actually on 6 copies because Thrust can either search the Bonfire, assuming you haven't hard drawn it, or the 7 Tachyon. Because Thrust lets you search anything in this deck, basically, it's just so incredibly strong. So you can essentially always assume you have some way to X Ryzeal. Now, I want to show off a interesting 2-card line here. And I want to explain why we do this line the way it does, because I think it really does illustrate how this deck should be played, and how you need to think about this deck when you're playing it. Put the other way around. Assuming you're going first, we are going to activate your X Ryzeal, or not activate, sorry, it does not activate, and you're playing your Eclipse Twins, activate your X Ryzeal here. The reason we're doing this here is now this is the first quote-unquote choke point. If your opponent stops your X Ryzeal, you are not going to get a second guaranteed level 4 body. Your opponent could stop you here. This is a place where they could Ash you. Let's assume they do. Normally, Ether Barrel activate the effect. Now this is a second quote-unquote checkpoint where your opponent can now negate you. They're not going to because they know you have 2 4s on board. So this is where you can go ahead and set your Lordly Load. Activate Lordly Load effect to search Trilby. And now if you make your Duo Drive and it gets negated, okay, I have follow-up and you're getting the negate off the drill in hand with the card. At that point, your opponent is now down 2 resources. You have 1 negate plus 4 other cards in hand, or 3 other cards in hand, and I think that is a completely fine scenario to be in. But assuming your duo drive does not get negated, you're going to detach your 2 materials, insert your 2 cards. That's going to go ahead and be your copy of Sword Ryzeal and your card Node Ryzeal. You're going to summon out your Sword Ryzeal and activate the effect Search. From here, you can go ahead and add yourself from deck to hand here's the card. Star Ryzeal. Now you go to summon your node, and node effect, send Ryzeal Duo Drive, summon out next. Overlay these two. For your Ecclesia, attach your material to summon out the Star Ryzeal and trigger Star effect, which lets you place cross here. Overlay these two to make your detonator and trigger the detonator effect, attaching your eclipsements. Then you'll be able to reload to summon from deck, of course, your RPG. Now this is, once again, 1 monster negate, 2 monster negates, 3 negates. This is 3 negates plus 3 pops into a 4-card hand. That's pretty good, right? I don't think I need to explain why that's good, but your goal is, this deck is really good at setting up nigh infinite negates if left uninterrupted, or playing really well through interruptions. Now, I would like to say something that you should probably expect when you play this deck. Assume your duo drive is never resolving. Let's go back to that scenario, but let's only have the X Ryzeal here. Summon your X Ryzeal, you're going to send, of course, your Eclipse One, and trigger the effect. Now, let's say your opponent is holding just an Imperm at this point. Now, some people will Imperm the X. I honestly sometimes do. It just really depends on what I know about my opponent's build, especially if it's like a person I've been testing against, or if it's a random. If it's a random person I'm saving for the duo drive, if it's a person I've been testing against, and I know their build, and I know how many copies of Bonfire to 7 Tachyon, to what their sub engines are, that requires a lot of personal knowledge that you have to just kind of know from people's decks. Unfortunately, that's not something I can really instruct you on. Have good judgment. If you're going to summon your sword effect. Here, you're going to grab your Ice Ryzeal, and you're actually going to normal your ice and trigger the effect. Summon out your Star Ryzeal, and now you're going to place your Ryzeal Frost. You are at 4 summons. You cannot get nibbed at this point. Sorry, you can get nibbed at your next opportunity. Which is why we're now going to overlay and make our Rafflesia. Next, overlay these two to make your duo drive and trigger your duo drive effect. Attaching 1 material, 2 material from among our monsters, and we can search, of course, our 2 cards. This is going to be your copy of, here's the card, your Node Ryzeal, and of course, Ice Ryzeal. You can now summon your Node Ryzeal, and now it depends. Do you fear something like a Nib Imperm column? At this point, if your opponent had a Nib Imperm, there was not actually a good point to use it, because at no point could they have actually Nib Impermed you in a way that mattered, because these 3 points were your direction. So once again, depends on your opponent's deck. If you feel that they are playing Nib, then you can do a line where you're actually not gonna use your Duo Drive. Instead, instead of the Eclipse Twins, you will send a Mirror Logic Aggravator. If you instead do this line, where you send a Mirror Logic Aggravator, summon out your Node Ryzeal, assuming you have no other cards, just straight up send to your graveyard your Ice Ryzeal, summon your Ice Ryzeal, the other copy from grave, and you can make yourself a detonator attach. If you believe your opponent's not on Nib, or you do not think they could possibly have a Nib, instead, when you send your Eclipse Twins, as explained before, summon out Node, and you're going to Node send the Duo Drive. Special summon out for Ice Ryzeal. And then, simply put, overlay, detonator, effect, attach the Eclipse Twins, and you're going to draw a card off the Ryzeal Cross with the 2X and sorting. That's why this line's a little more greedy. Now I want to talk about this deck more going second, because I think I'm gonna break up the combo part of this video for a little bit, just talk about the deck. The Ryzeals by themselves are really good at going second. X is a house going second. Sword just means that at any point you get interacted with, your sword is now online from hand, and some variable your opponent just has to play around. Star can set the Frost from deck, which means that you can just have a negate that your opponent cannot really do anything about. And of course, Node means you can have two bodies out of nowhere, which just threatens a lot of things. Now, the second thing that makes this deck really good going second, and we're not even going to talk about the other engines for a second, but let's focus on the Ryzeals for a moment, is the combination of Exciton Knight, Guska, and Detonator. Fuguska is a huge guy that if you're playing against a deck that doesn't play links, pass. Go ahead, play the game under the Fuguska. Nope, we are going to sit here and stare at each other for a while. Exciton means that if you're in a disadvantaged board state, pop the board, win the game, congratulations. And guess what? It still has material on it to attach either for a Star Ryzeal or for a Duo Drive. Detonator means that at the end of everything, or if your opponent you've been out in gate, you have 2 level 4s, your opponent's expecting you to go for Duo Drive. Nope. Slap Detonator on the board. Great. Every time you try and interact with me, you are trading even more interactions because I'm going to be popping your cards. For instance, let's say my opponent lets me get to this point. I make a Detonator. Oh, you yummy surprised me? Okay. Detach material. Pop another card you control. Oh, you're gonna activate Snatchy Synchro? Okay. I have to pop the Snatchy. Because this card's so good into actually yeah, this card into Snatchy is one of the best matchups. It's one of Detonator is so good in Snatchy. Like it's insane. Because the synchros that they play are not that great into this. And I just cannot overstate how good X is as going second tool, and the fact that you're playing 9 copies of it. Next, let's talk about our other cards that make this deck really good going second, which are our Mitsurugis. The Mitsurugis, and because of specifically Habakiri and Murakumo and Ritual, meaning that at any point in the game, if you've drawn any of them, you really can have access to the others, means that at any point in the game, your opponent must play around the fact that you could just, at any point, summon this from hand and just pop their board. The existence of the Mitsurugis means that your opponent has to fear them, which means their negates have to play around it. They cannot empty their hand for the fear of Murakuma becoming an Omni when it never had to be. And finally, the thing that really just does some. The Mitsurugis are probably, in my opinion, the strongest going second archetype we've ever had that wasn't meant to go second. What I mean by that is the Mitsurugis are really strong going first, obviously. But outside of decks like Tenpai, which was a deck designed in a lab to specifically be able to OTK from any position through any board with a number of degenerate cards that should not exist. This deck, it's so good into interaction because of how the monsters summon themselves back, what lets them summon them back, the fact that Prayers is a quick play spell, the existence of Kusanagi, which lets you grab back cards from Banishment as well, means that these cards are already strong going second, and you're supplementing them in a deck that can already get second. Finally, and this is the weekend of this deck when it comes to going second, the Primite cards. However, the Primite cards are actually okay going second. Because of the fact, if you draw any two of the Primite cards together, so say Drill Beam plus anything, but essentially if you draw Lordly Load plus Harpy Lady, Feather Barrel plus Harpy Lady, Lordly Load plus Harpy Lady, you can just activate the Lordly Load, search a Drill Beam, and now you have a Drill Beam. Drill Beam trades for Surprise, trades for Prayers. It can trade for a entire uh, Yummy Push if your opponent is bad at the game, or if depending on the line you're able to, depending on how you hand trap them, or just even even against like most rogue decks, it's trading for an IQ Masquerade. Like that's usually like the lowest value Drill Beam gets. And just because you're in, even if you don't have, let's say you have nothing in this hand, you have nothing, but you Lordly Load and you search the Drill Beam, that is a fear. Your opponent has to play around the fact that now you have the Drill Beam, and why would you search it if you didn't have a card to reveal for it? So yes, people will play around the Drill Beam. The reason I talk so much about this deck going second is because it is a deck playing almost no hand traps. Your hand traps you are playing are one copy of Droll, or one copy, three copies of Droll, your three Ash, your three Puwas. That's it. You are playing 9 hand traps in a 44 card deck. Your chances of seeing that, if we quickly pull up a little calculator, in fact, let me actually just pull up a calculator, are around. You are going to see 2 hand traps less than 8% of the time. Or sorry, you're going to say 3 hand traps less than 8% of the time, and that's not guarantee that they don't do the same thing. For instance, there isn't. While I did explain it wasn't bad to draw 2 Ash, you don't really want to see it. Like these 3 cards are really good to draw together, except for the Droll. Right, the Droll does not want to work with the Fool Loss. So, like for instance, these two are really strong together. These two are really strong together, but these leave you in an awkward situation. The triple tactics thrust and stuff as well really helps you because I mean 3 copies of Talents is broken going second. Because it means that not only are you thinning your deck really well with this deck, it also means that your deck is just so unbelievably capable into so many situations. Now, I want to show you what an insane person can do. What happens if you are just, like, you attempt the soul read, your opponent has 400 hand traps? Let me show you something. Let's assume your opponent is not great at the game, but not bad. And by that I mean they are a person of all time. So let's say you open your Lordly Load, you open your Hobkiri, right? Pretty good hand. But you also open Featherstorm. I know, 3-card combo. Kill me at the stake, I guess. You can activate your Lordly Load, and let's assume this gets Ash, right? Like, okay. It's a pretty good sign your opponent probably doesn't have a Droll if they Ash you. Your opponent lets this resolve, and you search your Feather Barrel, and then you get Drolled. Okay, you're summoning Feather Barrel. You're saying Drill Beam. You're summoning your Harpy Lady, and you're Featherstorming your opponent. That's not what I'm interested in. So let's assume if you get Ash on this card. This tells you 2 things. Your opponent definitely doesn't have a Droll, because otherwise they probably would have let it resolve. And assume you're playing Blue Eyes, because then you can't link it off for Spirit. Spirit search the Mausoleum. Even assuming you do none of the in white cards, probably the line most players are going to go for, assuming they know the deck. So assuming they Ash this, right, which try to cut you off the cards, you're kind of calling that you don't have a Sage. In that scenario, you are instead going to activate the effect of Summon from Deck, which this locks you from activating the effects of monsters on field. And you might be thinking, wait, why would he do that? Well, you see, Featherstorm. Featherstorm can be activated from hand because you now control Harpy Lady. At this point, you are completely hand trap resistant. Your opponent is going to not be able to do anything to you because every cantrip that Feather Storm doesn't stop in this context is Impulse, which if you get Impulse, that kind of just sucks for you, I will say. Actually, Impulse might be. But every other one, outside that one, does nothing here. Trigger the Makoto Saji effect, search a ritual effect. Now you might be thinking, let's talk about the lock on our Primite Lord's Load. Lordly Load does in fact lock you from activating the effects of Special Summon monsters. But now, these cards aren't Special Summon, they're great. So we can pair both their effects. Ritual, send. Summon out the Murakumo. Oh wait, this card's also going to trigger in Graveyard. Your prayers. And now you're going to prayers. Tribute to search and summon. So let's search, of course. One of the last monsters left in our deck. Summon out the Kusanagi. And wait, Murakumo's going to trigger in Graveyard here. So, yes, at no point during this have you been able to be stopped. Because you, opponent, cannot activate monster effects. And now you can just make something like a Rafflesia and pass on this, using the Rafflesia as a Ripper to completely insulate yourself from plays. And if you do not think what I'm showing currently is a winning board into a world where you've gone hand trapped already, I would like you to genuinely stop playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Because so many players have a problem, and I call this a magical problem, where they look at a deck based only on how many negates it can end on. And don't get me wrong, this deck can end on a quadrillion negates. But your question shouldn't be that. It should be, one, is this board enough? And what I'm currently showing you is enough. You are showing, this is a negate, Raigeki, another negate, kind of negate, we'll call it 50-50 negate. And its follow-up is the important part. Because if your opponent does not stop this prayers, they have lost the game. Because you are going to detach this Kusanagi at some point. You are going to tribute your Murakumo for the prayers. When you've decided your opponent has gone too far, you're going to Raigeki them. And you're going to be able to, not only are you going to search the Harakiri, you're going to be able to activate both of these effects of the Kusanagi, adding back a prayers, or anything really in your graveyard. You're going to summon back the Murakumo, wiping the board. Now, that depends if you're going to Kusanagi, obviously summon. I'm not going to. And now you're also going to get to search another prayers. Right? And this deck generates so many cards because now your opponent has to fear so many cards on the crackback. Not only do they have to fear the they leave either ritual up, you can just make the Drogluxion. If you leave the 2/4s, you can make a duo drive. And every card in your deck is so exposed from position, and you have cycled so many random cards out of your deck. This deck ramps in a way that I don't think other Yu-Gi-Oh decks really do. Where every single deck, every single turn, you are getting more scary. Your draws become better. They're either insanely impactful non-engine in simplified board states, or they're Ryzeals, which each Ryzeal represent full combo, which means they have to be answered by your opponent. If your opponent sets up 6 negates and you open a hand of X Ryzeal and 5 other good cards, you are playing through 6 negates. That's what people need to understand. And that's why I think this deck is so good. Because in reality, I think it has, like, one of Yomi's problems is that it's good, but not perfect at playing into boards. This deck, like, legitimately, I think this deck could be a going second deck, and it would not feel that much worse. So I really do implore you, right, to spend time and look at this deck, think about the deck, and potentially consider playing it. Do I think my list is 100% optimal? Yes. But maybe one of you guys is able to think of a line I couldn't think of, or see something I could, because I'm just one person. However, I think it is important that people understand that decks like this that have so many powerful spells are really being held back by draw. A lot of people have talked about a draw ban. If we get a draw ban, I think that I legitimately will never play a deck that's not this for the rest of my time alive. Assuming this deck is still playable, assuming the metagame hasn't eclipsed this deck entirely, assuming this deck is even okay, I will play this deck. Because this deck just feels fun to play in a way. Yomimitsu is a deck that I don't feel have fun playing. The deck feels so unbelievably unsmooth in a way the way it functions. It feels so disjointed in its game plan to where it feels unfun. This deck is full of cute synergies, searchers, and it's just Yu-Gi-Oh to me. Do I have some deeper philosophical comment? No. But I think that this is, once again, to me, what Yu-Gi-Oh is. A deck like this being good is what I think makes Yu-Gi-Oh the card game for me. The reason I don't play Pokemon, the reason I don't play Magic, is because, once again, because decks like this exist and because they can be good. But that's a lot of philosophy. Let's talk about some other stuff. Let's talk about actual card game stuff. Um, Sorry, I have notes on my other screen, and my brain is turning to mush. No. Good, right. Okay, there we go. Let's talk about the garnets that this deck plays, because I will say, if there's a reason to turn you off this deck, this is probably it. And I'm going to be honest with you. I can understand it. If you are a person who is used to playing a deck that plays 0 bricks and never folds and always every single card in your hand is always playable at every point in time, this deck probably looks like a mess to you. Probably like, what idiot, what moron put together a deck with so many garnets? I mean, look at this stuff. Look at how many cards in this deck can be described as garnets. But I want to discuss every card here and explain why they're actually not garnets. Or, if they are a garnet, we're going to yell at them. Actually, sorry, there should be one other card here that I just missed, which is Ritual. There we go. Gravediggers and Featherstorm. I already showed you why Featherstorm is good earlier in this video, is it plays around hand traps if you open the Primite stuff. I will admit, if you draw it, guess what you get to make? You get to make the Stell. If you're going second, have good judgment. I don't know what you want me to tell you. Gravedigger's Trap Hole. I will admit, can suck to draw, because it does make your lines less predicted against Nib. But, you know, if you are going to activate Gravedigger's Trap Hole just as a trap card, I mean, there are worse trap cards you could be playing, I'm going to be honest with you. Drill Beam and Cross are both searchable cards that actually get kind of set off deck more often than get searched, which is kind of funny. But both of them are actually fine to draw. Cross list you early against hand traps. And Drill Beam is insane going second, as I've kind of already explained, and why the Primite cards are really good in this deck for going second. Both of these cards are actually good drawing to go second, despite the fact that they are 1-0s and they're kind of garnety. Like, yeah, if you draw either of these cards without anything else, they're terrible, sure. But I can say that about any card. I can say that about Yummy Cupsy is bad because it loses Temper. See? Oh, which is also just not true, but I can pretend it's true because I think no deck should have a one card combo that plays around more than one hand trap. Anyway, the ritual effect to summon from hand or deck means that Murakumo is always successful. And if Murakumo is in your hand, it means that when you search your ritual and go for hand, your opponent has to guess. Do you have Habkiri or do you have Murakumo? Because I'm going to be honest, there have been games I've won because I've hard drawn the Murakumo. My opponent just does not expect me to drop the when I go ritual. They say, yeah, some Habkiri. And I say, no. I'm summoning Murakumo, and I've won the game off that because they just kind of assume it's in deck. So, yeah, actually. It can swing games to have either of these cards in hand. Ritual, of course, means that when you go for your Hapakiri line, something that's very interruptible by specifically Ash right now is the main card that we use to interrupt it. Doesn't matter because you just ritual from hand and win the game. In fact, there have been times where I've done that. Someone has activated a card, I like on Habakiri, my opponent ashes me, I activate the ritual spell, summon from hand, and they've just conceded. Because their ash has now done nothing. Harpy Lady is fine to draw, mainly because you're going to probably discard it off of the card. But more importantly, it's a card to reveal for Drill Beam, so if you draw 2 Garnets, or if you draw a good card, like a Lordly Load, guess what? Now you just have a board breaker with the Drill Beam that you search up Lordly Load. Kusanagi and Night Sword Serpent do nothing, right? Like if they're drawn, it doesn't actually matter that much because you're just going to send them to graveyard off the ritual anyway, and ritual can send from hand if you use the summon from deck or summon from hand mode. You can also still send from hand even if you want to send from deck. And Star Ryzeal is an extender. I have nothing special to say. It's still an extender. It's still okay. It's just, it's not 2 bodies by itself. Unlike every other Ryzeal name is 2 bodies by itself. X is 2 Ryzeals by searching Sword. Sword is 2 Ryzeals by searching X. Ice is 2 by summoning 1 from deck. Node is 2 by summoning 1 from graveyard, right? Every single Ryzeal is 2 Ryzeals. Except for Star, so. Alright. Now, I can defend every Garnet here. Except Saji. Because this card is terrible to draw. Like, when I was seeing the praises of Ritual, because at least when you draw it with stuff, it feels good. You know what happens if you draw Saji plus, Habakiri? Do you think that plays around? You would think, oh, okay, well, Saji's just a ritual, so it's the same type of ritual, right? No. If you normal summon Saji and get negated, you will have lost the game. Unless you have like an X Ryzeal or something to extend from hand. If you had X Ryzeal, you are not going to ever be summoning the Saji in that context. You're going to be going for an X line that I showed earlier because it actually plays into hand traps and actually I think would be increase your chances of winning. Saji just is such a terrible card, and that's why I consider playing 2 of it. I legitimately was like, what if I play 2? Because then, when I draw 1, it won't matter. But no, you cannot let your emotions get in your way of your good deck building, and good deck building tells me to play 1 cards. I will not play 2. I will not fold. But I have actually been overly negative about these cards because, yes, sure, they kind of have a bad draw. And, well, everyone except for Saji has utility going first or second if you're the drawn. But you actually are going to cycle cards in your deck. And that's one thing I really like. Because you know what's also kind of a brick? Well, Charming Fool Us, one of the best cards in the game right now, is kind of a brick. If you go first, these cards serve very low utility. They're a rank 4 or level 4 that you can summon, maybe make a rank 4. I will fully admit, I've summoned a Fool Us, set Harkness Firestorm, and passed because I drew nothing else. Or I have Normal Summon Fool Us, made Duo Drive. Because Duo Drive almost never resolves, a lot of time when I Normal Summon the Fool Us, I just assume I'm throwing a card away. But not only are you playing the Russ, but most of the time you're either thrusting for Bonfire, or more importantly, you're thrusting for a card like 7 Tachyon. And 7 Tachyon requires you to put a card back in your hand. But you know what it is? All these cards, because of how accessible they are, if you draw a Night Sword, you can always 7 Tachyon, put the Night Sword back, and then do Mitsurugi stuff, right? It means that these cards don't actually break you. And you know what's even better? Let's talk about that Night Sword Serpent situation where you've drawn no other access to Mitsurugis. When you do Garas, and do Garas draw 2, discard 1, discard the Night Sword Serpent, Night Sword summons itself from that, in the same way a Tear Limit would. Same thing with all these cards. If you are bricking on any of these cards, you can just send them to grave. The only one I wouldn't suggest sending to grave is probably Ryzeal Cross, because every other card here can either come back in some way. Murakumo can come back through a Kusanagi, and Saji. It doesn't really matter if you lost them, but they can kind of come back from prayers. And Night Sword Serpent can come back when it's sent. Ritual can come back through Kusanagi. Star Ryzeal is put back in your deck by the cross. Harpy Lady can be anywhere to be summoned by load. Drill Beam can reset itself if you control a Primite card. Gravedigger Trap Hole is just not that important to the Graves game plan, and you're going to lose Featherstorm anyway. If you're not able to activate the Featherstorm, if you're able to activate Featherstorm, you would have already, which means you cannot use it this turn. And assuming this is a going second situation, if it's going first, you're just never discarding the Featherstorm because it's a card that says win the game. If you could make Dugaris, you could have made Castel and won the game, so you're probably never discarding this card. Cross is the only one you can't actually get back if you put it in deck, so I would suggest keeping it in hand. Oh my God, sorry, my voice is not the greatest. I've been a little bit sick recently, so I'm sorry if my tone is a little bit lower than it normally is. I do want to go more in depth, but I think when I go more in depth, I want to actually do it through gameplay. And so I am going to start recording games I play with this deck on DB, and then recording them back. And I'll either live commentate over them, or I will do uh, I can do a replay review afterwards. But I would like to ask you guys, what would you guys like? I know like maybe four total people are going to watch this video, and probably even less than that isn't going to ever get to the point in this video. But if you are one of the people who gets there, maybe, hi. Is there something you're interested in? Because I like this deck. I want to talk more about this. Um, I would love to do local reports. I mean, I took this deck to locals twice at this point. I've just not had that much time to go to locals recently. I've been very busy. But, you know, this is me reaching out to you guys, or maybe you guy, we'll see. But it's tiring, but it's honest work. If you are interested in like this deck list and or any of the specific ratios we're playing, because I did say I wanted to talk about that, but then I kind of realized that'd be kind of really boring. I wrote out about 150, 150, 1,500 words about ratios and why we're playing specific cards at a specific ratio. And I kind of went into it in this video, but not as much as I normally would have if, like, especially when we were doing testing. Shout outs to my test supporters, by the way, because I don't think you understand the number of times I've hit them up at like 1 a.m. and they've been like, yeah, sure, I'll play. Or they tell me to kill myself and go to bed. But with that, this has been way more in depth. This is like different than my tier video because when I did tier, I went in depth on what each individual card was, but not in depth on the deck itself. And for those wondering, because I think this is the easiest thing to say, order of operations is always going to be your let's just quickly talk about starters. It's going to be X Ryzeal, Ice Ryzeal, Murakumo, Hapkiri, then Sword, then Load, and then finally Hero. What I mean when I say this, because I just really cannot believe it took me this. If you're this is the order. I think if you for instance if you open an X Ryzeal or wait to X, you can always lead X. Then you normal your ice because it uses your normal, unfortunately. Habakiri is next because Habakiri, you actually kind of want to use these to bait out hand traps. Habakiri is so strong, you don't want to use it after these. Sword Ryzo because unfortunately it require your normal summon, and you could like these cards at least have utility to special. Not really the same thing with Sword. Lordly Load because leading Lordly Load doesn't do anything really, and same thing kind of with Aetherrail. Neither of these cards are combo by themselves. All these are. Oh, I will say though, uh, I would lead Primate Lordly Load. I think you either arrange it like this, or sorry, like this, or you arrange it like this. And the reason for that is, and the reason I'm going to explain to rearrange it like this is what you do, especially games 2 and 3. It changes because this is the order going first in games where you think your opponent has sided in draw, or once again, we are currently in draw format, but I want to talk about it in general. If we are not in a format that has draw, but you think your opponent might be siding draw and they've sided in draw, this is the order going first because now these cards are very good to serve. However, going second, I would order it like this because you really want to bait out negates, then be able to Habakiri your opponent. And these, unless you've drawn 2 of these cards, in which case, once again, they jump back up to front because Drill Beam is a hell of a card. Otherwise, we are at about 50 minutes. I'm tired. You're tired. Thank you for staying in here with me. And with that, hope you guys have a good day, good life, and I'll see you guys next time.